Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson of Farmers Branch, thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on
It's
Politics.
always great to see you, Jack.
Nice to see you. So let's start with the U.S. bombing of Iran.
Mhm.
And I want to know what your thoughts were about the military mission and now the ceasefire between Israel and Iran.
Well, we don't want a nuclearized Iran, right? That is a full stop. Nobody wants Iran to possess nuclear weapons. And so obviously the president felt like they needed to intervene, that Israel obviously had taken those steps. I'm actually going to get a classified briefing on it tomorrow. So I'll be interested to see what is up with that. But obviously, the men and women of our military executed the mission that the president had for them. Seems like they executed it well. The news reports are that maybe Trump had leaked too much on the front side and it didn't create as much interference in their program as maybe we would have liked. But I'll learn more of those details tomorrow. But thrilled that there's a ceasefire. That's what we want. We want peace in the region. We certainly don't want to have people in harm's way ever. And so we always want efforts to try to stabilize that region. It's a hot mess, and anything we can do to have more peace and stability for the people in that area, I think is great. But at the end of the day, it's in our national interest and in the interest of Israel, and I think the world, for Iran not to be a nuclear power.
And, right now, the world is wondering what is Iran going to do, right? Because even if there is extensive damage, maybe there it wasn't a totally obliterated the nuclear
Mm-hmm.
program, you know, do you trust Iran going forward not to rebuild?
I think we always have to be suspicious. They're intense. They're a very hostile power to the United States. They're a hostile power to Israel and their right to exist. They have been an enemy of this country for many years. So I don't think we can trust them to do anything at this point.
And yesterday, we're talking on Wednesday, but yesterday there was a vote on a resolution by Congressman Al Green of Houston to impeach the president
Mm-hmm.
over this situation. You were one of five Democrats in Texas to vote to table that.
Right.
Why did you feel that this was not necessary?
Well, we don't have the votes to impeach the president. And so it's just simple as that. Democrats have tried that path. They've sung that song twice now, unsuccessfully, and it just creates diversion from the message that Democrats have that's really permeating through the people of this country. That his economic policies are failing the American people. His foreign policies are making us less safe. His dismantling of USAID and America's role in the world is creating havoc. He's not delivering on lower prices for people. He's creating fear and terror through our immigrant communities. And we don't want to distract from that narrative, especially for a situation where we don't have the votes to prevail. I like to win in politics, and I like to be strategic about efforts that we take. And it makes absolutely no sense to me to try to give Trump this distraction of narrative and news cycle on a motion that we just don't have the votes for.
Does the fact that 79 Democrats voted to impeach the president hurt the party?
Well, everybody has the right to vote their districts, right? My district has sent me to Congress to be effective in this building and to be able to call balls and strikes and make decisions so that we can be positioned in the room, in the tent, in the most effective way possible. All of Democratic leadership voted the same way I did. Over 150 Democrats voted the same way I did. I think the vast majority of the Democratic caucus wants to stay focused on holding Trump accountable for the policies that he's inflicting on the American people, for making life a lot harder, more expensive, and less safe for everyone. And so that's what we need to stay focused on. That's the narrative we need to continue to talk about. And getting distracted on an impeachment quest where we obviously don't have the votes to prevail didn't seem like a prudent thing to do.
One thing you said I just wanted to ask you about again, and that was that the president's foreign policy is making people less safe,
Yeah.
but not in the case of Iran, as we just discussed.
Well, he obviously, I think we need to do everything we can in that specific instance to denuclearize Iran. But, I serve on foreign affairs. I've been party to many, many hearings about the dismantling of USAID. I had a hearing today with Carrie Lake about their destruction of Voice of America. And that's the pathway that we broadcast democratic values through hostile areas through the entire world. And I think there's a lot of things that the Trump administration is doing to obliterate our soft power and our role of influence. And they're giving China a huge opportunity to come in and fill the void. And I think that does make our country less safe.
I do want to ask you about the tax and spending cuts now going through the Senate. But I did want to ask you about the special session in Texas. There has been a lot of discussion. There was a report in the New York Times recently, as you know, that President Trump wants Governor Abbott to have a special session in part so that lawmakers can redraw congressional districts in Texas. And to favor Republicans, which could impact you and your district if that happens. What have you heard specifically about this, and what's your thought?
Well, what we know is that Trump knows that he's going to lose in the midterms, that his policies aren't popular with the American people, and that they're very concerned that they're going to lose the House. And that just shows that what they're doing isn't the right course, that they're not fulfilling their campaign promises. People are not able to afford their life better since Trump was elected. In fact, it's been harder with tariffs and increasing pressures. So what are they going to do? They're having to try to rig the system, cheat the system, try to redraw maps, pack districts to try to get, eke out some more seats out of Texas. Texas Republicans tell me privately they don't want it. They don't want their seats to be more competitive, because when they do that, right now, if they try to eke out more seats and these margins will be closer. Right now, a lot of these Republicans have a little cushy lead, and they don't want that to be competitive. If you'll recall, in the 2020 election, we had like 5 or 6 congressional seats in Texas at play. And if they do this, it'll probably open up that same margin, which doesn't bode well for Republicans on a statewide race either. In 2018, if you'll recall, when we had so many competitive congressional seats and so many competitive state legislative seats, when I flipped my House seat, Beto came within 200,000 votes of winning a statewide race. So I think it's just stupid for Republicans to go down this path. I think Republicans know that this is stupid also, but they're too chicken to tell the president no. So they'll probably end up doing it. It's another example of Republicans shooting themselves in the foot because they don't have the courage to tell their president that this idea is stupid. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think, there's conversations that blue states may say, okay, fine, if you're going to redistrict in red states, we'll redistrict in blue states. And so this could be just a complete chaotic environment across the country that doesn't need to happen.
Let's talk about what the president calls the one big beautiful bill. You and I have discussed this multiple times before. It's now gone to the Senate. They're making changes. It'll come back to the House. We'll see what happens. If you, Julie Johnson, Congresswoman from Farmers Branch, had, the say on all this, what would your tax cuts be? And would you include any spending cuts?
I think this Trump bill we have right now is just an irresponsible bill. We always want to see a strong business climate. I'd like to see the Affordable Care Act credits. We want people to be able to afford health care. I would definitely have child tax credits. We want to see people have affordable child care. I have a foster care tax credit bill to incentivize people to come foster parents. I think there's absolutely things that we would do. I would increase the SALT tax deduction. Texas has high property taxes. So there's several things in terms of tax credits that I think we would do. And I think in terms of spending cuts, there's a lot of programs that we can tighten our belt on for sure. But I think that the way that Republicans have gone about it with this sledgehammer approach, without prudent, responsible hearings, without prudent and responsible digging into the programs that work and that don't work. There's a vast amount of programs that are paid for in the United States government. I certainly wouldn't put $45 billion on a wall that's not going to work, and so I think there's that. And so I'm for a balanced budget. I think we need a responsible budget in this country. We cannot continue adding to our deficit. We're heading down a financial crisis. Our credit rating has already been lowered. And so we absolutely need to come together. But doing all of this, having all this pain on the American people solely so that about 1,000 people can have a tax break is irresponsible and is not good governance and is not fiscally sound, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, as far as the tax cuts are concerned, the Republicans say if these tax cuts, the income taxes on individuals and married folks, will go up if this is not made permanent.
Well,
Uh,
I just, I disagree on that. I think that certainly I want tax relief for middle class folks, just like everybody else, and I would absolutely support that. But what I'm objecting to is the tax breaks that he's giving to the very wealthiest of folks with fuzzy math of interest and tax loopholes and this sort of thing that really only benefits the exceedingly wealthy people in this country at vast sums of money. And so that's what this is about. This is about Trump giving tax cuts on the backs of working families and working people in this country and in Texas, so that his rich friends can pay less taxes when they can absolutely afford to do so. And I don't think that's right.
what about business tax cuts as far as like allowing them to have expenses, write off their expenses so that they can grow and invest in themselves?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We need a healthy business environment. Businesses need to be able to write off reasonable expenses. Um, and that's part of the business, the thing, they have expenses. Taxes are designed to tax income and not total revenues per se. And so income is, revenues generated minus expenses. So expenses are things that should be able to be factored into a business environment. Heck, we want businesses to succeed in this country. That's part of our entrepreneurial spirit. There's a whole bunch of people watching this show that want to own their own business one day. We want to make it to where the tax policy allows them to do that, where that business can say, hey, yeah, I can hire that next employee. I can create that next job. We want and that is good for business. It's good for Texas. It's good for our country. But what we have in this particular bill is not just about that. It goes way beyond protecting small businesses from having expenses. It goes into creating a tax cuts for very, very wealthy people at the cutting of benefits to the extent of cutting 16 million people off of Medicaid. I don't think that's right.
So let's talk about Medicaid because I went back. You and I have talked about it. I've talked about it with other Democratic members of Congress, Republican members of Congress. And I went back and I asked the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which oversees Medicaid. And I asked about, as far as the Medicaid cuts. I was told that the Medicaid budget is still going to grow. It's just the cuts are from the growth, not from the original budget. Is that true? That's what I was told. That this.
That's not my understanding, but they're cutting a budget, and they were given a directive to cut $860 billion out of that budget for Medicaid, which is going to kick 16 million people off of critical health insurance. It's interesting. Dallas Chamber was in my office today. Businesses across the country, so many advocacy groups, everyone is opposed to these Medicaid cuts. The only people that are pushing it is Trump, and now Republicans are acquiescing to that because it only benefits Trump and his friends. But I think kicking 16 million people off of health care is not a good way to go.
And because I've asked Republicans about it, and they say what they're trying to focus on is pregnant women, the poor, and the disabled, and able-bodied people. They say should certainly have to go and work at least 20 hours a day in order to get benefits.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with able-bodied people. The problem is that our minimum wage is $7.75 an hour. The problem is that you can work 40 hours a week in the state of Texas and still be Medicaid eligible because of the income requirements, because they didn't expand it to the higher rates. And this is ridiculous. Medicaid predominantly supports women and kids as it is. And so they're just cutting money out of it. They're cutting benefits. Rural hospitals in Texas are going to close. The Hospital Association in Texas and across the country, the Medical Association, every medical group has been in my office very concerned about these Medicaid cuts. It's what it's going to do to their patients, what it's going to do for their ability to provide care to people in Dallas, people in Texas, people in rural Texas, and they're very, very worried about it. And I'm listening to them.
All right, we will leave it there. Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson of Farmers Branch. Thank you as always. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Jack. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.